very rich model. As Chrissy said, it's not brand new, but it gives us a very good framework. What do we mean by teaching presence? That's communicating to students that we care by things like the organisation, by things like clarity, by things like the right kind of messaging, the right kind of scaffolding. The cognitive presence is communicating that we care about their development, you know, the transformational experience that education can actually be. And of course, we're doing it by first remove, in a sense, because we work with the colleagues. But basically, we facilitate things that facilitates colleagues to actually make a real difference in students. And this is all, in a way, as this diagram shows quite well, I think, overlapping with that social presence, which is so much more than just letting our cat walk across the screen, although I think that's how people kind of found their way into it, funnily enough. It's much more about having that relational pedagogy, which actually shows that there's a partnership with students, there's a partnership with our colleagues, there's a partnership that works properly with professional services. For instance, we some of our participants do come from the various professional services as well. And we've been talking before about how new collaborations have come into play in this period, and actually we've been able to you know, facilitate a little bit more of that, or at least encourage and foster it. So I think this diagram does show the potential richnesses. And when you're evaluating your own work, it can be also quite a good thing to just sort of sketch out on a piece of paper the different aspects and see what you're doing in those areas, which we'll come back to at the end of this talk.
So what we have done here is we have brought together a lived experience of the Community of Inquiry framework. Linda.
So I'm going to start by focusing on the teach presence aspect, although as mentioned previously, these all overlap and interconnect, but just for the purposes of this presentation, focusing particularly on that teach presence and some of the kind of the work and what we have done and how we've tried to engage colleagues. So one of the things that we did as a team, so we work in the University Teaching Academy, and we work very closely with colleagues and across the university. So this represents work of many colleagues, not just our service, is to support how the curriculum and the curriculum framework was going to be adjusted. Because we made two quite big changes within our university. We moved to a block mode of delivery as well as embracing blended learning. So those two things together required quite a lot of conversations with colleagues across the faculties. We built a curriculum planning toolkit that scaffolded and guided aspects of that process, but that wasn't to impose that on colleagues. It was to give some tools that they could use, adapt for their own disciplines, their own purposes. Within those toolkits, it was also the possibility to reconceptualize what type of engaging learning activities could actually happen, and what is the optimum way of doing some of those things. Been very privileged over the last couple of weeks to start to hear much more about the innovations and the creativity that went into the development of these new conceptualized curricula, whereby colleagues perhaps liberated in some ways from the confines of the buildings and the geographical spaces, have been able to do all sorts of very interesting work, international collaborations. So that sense of imagining the curriculum and reimagining the curriculum has been a real focus of conversations within our university over the last term or so, as I'm sure they have for everyone else. I'm really curious to know what other people think of those things. Stephanie.
And moving on to the social, as Linda said, you know, it's been an opportunity for revisiting and reviewing. How much do we want to, for example, look at the power dimension that is inherent in someone standing in a huge lecture theatre with their hundreds of students, possibly engaged, possibly not engaged. We didn't really know, did we? And how much do we want to start making collaborative partnerships possible, as mentioned? Another important thing, going back many years ago, I remember reading some research literally 20, 30 years ago about confidence. Work was done in schools by the Education Development Association, I remember, where you have a very confident head, you have confident staff, you have confident children. Where there is lack of trust or confidence in the leadership, this sinks straight down. So for us, very important to bolster and encourage confidence, trust and collaborative practice in the programme so that this can filter down to the students. And the final thing, I'm gabbling slightly because we have a time pressure, but the final thing about this is not to underplay the importance of affect. Affect is, how we feel about learning. Learning is an experience for students. It's not something purely quantitative. And so again, to embrace the things we've learned about affect in this time where staff are still saying to us, I can't get them to engage, they won't turn their cameras on, which, unfortunately is how it has been reduced. But we are working against that to recognise all those different kinds of engagement that can happen, even with a pencil and paper by their phone, if it isn't a computer, somewhat quietly. Chrissy.
Yes, okay, and linking to that, how Stephanie just finished about that engagement as seen as having the camera switched on. How can we resist that notion of engagement as camera switched on? How can we scaffold engagement? How can we build community? How can we build trust and confidence, like Linda and Stephanie have already said? And I mean, what has worked for us is approaches like storytelling, making, play and using object. And on the pictures here on the right hand side you see an example where I've been teaching, I've been a guest on a nutritional science unit, level 4 first year undergraduate students, to talk about the Mediterranean diet. So for me it wasn't about talking about the Mediterranean diet, it's about providing an experience in engaging our students in that experience. As you can see, I've made a Greek salad and I had all kinds of props, and on the bottom picture you see the results, but also you see that most of the cameras were switched on. That didn't hinder participation, that didn't hinder engagement. We got loads of positive feedback and students were engaged despite the fact that their cameras were not all on. And I think we are moving on, and Rob said we should finish. So one thing here we said, it is about the human connection, and that's what we want to highlight. Our colleagues have come to realize the importance of that during the pandemic, and it is reimagining. Now it is a great opportunity to reimagine. We know that our session is coming to an end, and we would invite you perhaps to continue the conversation here in the chat or on Twitter. Many of us are connected through various modes. Stephanie.
No, let's keep on the conversation. This is the start. This is not the end. And again, thank you very much for letting us be part of this today. Very much enjoyed it.
Thank you.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. That was really good. Keep the questions coming. We'll roll straight on to the next presentation, and then if we've got time at the end, then we can obviously come back into more discussion, if that's okay. So I'd like to sort of hand over to Stuart and Ingeborg now. So if we can hand over Stuart and Ingeborg, please.
Yep, thanks very much, Rob. Just getting our slides up just now.